reducing them. Similarly, in tactical missions, where a group of agents or soldiers must coordinate their action, one such soldier improperly following the requisite communication procedure can result in the compromise of the entire mission or to more human lives being lost. If the security problems for systems of wireless agents is solved in uncoordinated and incompatible ways, then the resultant wireless systems will be unlikely to support a full possible range of new applications, thereby limiting the potential impact that wireless technologies can have on our society. Thus, as wireless technologies allow for increasingly pervasive interactions between individuals and software agents, regulating the interaction between these agents will become imperative. To place the proposed work in context, let us consider the issue of underutilization of spectrum. One of the chief reasons for this problem is that the entities acquiring the usage rights to spectrum in primary markets from the regulatory authorities such as the FCC in US are unable to utilize it to its full extent. Moreover, the current approach to secondary spectrum trading in the US directly involves the FCC, thus making these transactions cumbersome, costly, and time-consuming, besides rendering them unsuitable for small-scale applications. Therefore, one way to improve the overall spectrum utilization is to make it easier for the consumers to trade the exclusive access rights to a portion of spectrum by removing the hassles of getting the corresponding transactions directly approved by the FCC. However, the trading in such a decentralized secondary spectrum marketplace must obey the trading rules formulated by the government in order to be practical and effective. For example, the FCC may, on behalf of the federal government in US, set up rules pertaining to participation, power level of transmission, buying and selling, leasing or transferring of spectrum blocks, taxes, monitoring requirements, etc. Moreover, such a marketplace may need to support the hierarchical organization of policies to take into account the hierarchical nature of the authorities, such as the federal government, state government, local authorities, etc., that may be involved in defining its route. Further, it should be possible to use the traded exclusive access rights to spectrum for policing the spectrum use. Overall, the requirements of such a marketplace can be met only by a decentralized, proactive, that is able to initiate actions and not limited to merely accepting or rejecting a message. Stateful, that is sensitive to the history of interactions, regulatory mechanism that supports hierarchical organization of policies, and that can enforce a common set of rules across all the heterogeneous participants so that the communal properties of the marketplace cannot be violated. We have used law-governed interaction as the basis of our approach to address these challenges as it satisfies the above described properties. So what about other mechanisms? Can they meet the challenges we are trying to address in this work? Here is the list of some other frameworks relevant to the context of this work along with their drawbacks. Trust management systems such as Keynote have been designed to provide decentralization of authority and management operations in distributed systems. However, these systems are intrinsically suitable for server-centric policies, dealing with a single server that has a policy regarding the services it intends to provide to its distributed clients. Certificate-based delegation is a prominent approach to delegation in distributed systems, in which rights are delegated by signing public key certificates. CBD is closely associated with the trust management approach to authorization. This scheme does not rely on trusted authorities or infrastructure. As a result, it possesses some fundamental limitations, some of which are lack of support for non-monotonic policies such as separation of duties, inability to support transfer of privileges, where the delegator loses the privilege it delegates, etc. Drama is a policy-based network management system for mobile ad hoc networks in which policies are concerned with monitoring, configuration, and reporting of management events. Drama policies are enforced in a distributed manner by policy agents that are co-located with the managed network elements. However, Drama does not deal with controlling the communication between the network elements. Moreover, it possesses a rudimentary and stateless access control capability. Viterbo et al. Have proposed a mechanism that allows the regulation of interaction between applications in ubiquitous computing. A domain regulatory service is used to coordinate the interactions between the client and server applications based on an explicit set of rules and contextual data. This service essentially acts as a centralized entity which may become a bottleneck besides being a single point of failure. Moreover, this system does not support stateful policies. Ray is a flexible and expressive policy language for pervasive computing applications that allows a variety of policies to be specified. However, Ray does not provide any support for handling communication faults or stateful policies. Role-based access control is a prominent approach to access control, but it lacks support for stateful and proactive policies. This model views roles which may represent things such as the position an entity holds in an organization as a set of permissions and defines an access control policy mapping users to a set of permissions via roles. Several authors have tried to achieve interoperability between agents operating under different policies by composing their corresponding policy into a single policy. However, policy composition is computationally hard, and according to Seven, it is intractable for more than two policies, even for a simple policy language. Moreover, some of these efforts do not even address the issue of enforcement of policies.
Why role-based access control cannot serve the purpose? Can you elaborate more on it?
So it does not provide support for stateful and proactive policies. An example of stateful policy in this context, like when I described the secondary spectrum marketplace model, if a user wants to transfer a portion of its access right to another user, it cannot be done by role-based access control because this model views for all the permissions as roles. So if you want to transfer a privilege, you have to assign a role to a new role has to be created for that permission. Moreover, budgetary controls such as the number of times you can use a privilege also cannot be handled by role-based access control. In this dissertation, we focus on the regulation of wireless communication between the agents of an open mobile heterogeneous distributed system. Specifically,
I have a question. Perhaps in this context, one of the most important things is completely decentralized.
Yes.
And for your work, it has to be decentralized.
Specifically, we consider the problem of trading of exclusive access rights to a portion of spectrum in secondary spectrum marketplaces and the corresponding usage of those rights to regulate the transmission of radio devices. To show the viability of this idea, we then introduce a reliable and secure mechanism for establishing common coordination protocols over ad hoc multi-agent systems whose members interact with each other via wireless communication. Finally, we consider the problem of resiliency in stateful decentralized access control to primarily protect the innocent wireless agents from the rogue behavior of Byzantine agents. Here is a broad outline for the presentation. We have already motivated the need for this work and set the theme for this dissertation. Next, we provide a brief overview of log-on interaction, which acts as the basis of our approach. After that, we go into the details of the three parts of this work. Finally, we end with a conclusion and provide direction for future work. Let us quickly go over the fundamental concepts of LGI. LGI is a mode of interaction that allows an open group of distributed heterogeneous agents to interact with each other with confidence that the explicitly specified policies known as the law of the open group is complied with by everyone in the group. The messages exchanged under a law L are known as L messages, and the group of agents interacting via L messages is referred to as an L community. LGI does not assume any knowledge about the structure and behavior of the members. It deals only with the interaction between these members. Laws are about local behavior, but they have global communal implications because everybody in the given community is subject to the same law. LGI provides high expressive power and supports stateful as well as proactive laws. Laws can be written either in Java or in Prolog. Concretely, we have used the Java-based law language because it is more efficient. However, despite the pragmatic importance of a particular language being used for specifying laws, the semantics of LGI are basically independent of that language. LGI further supports interoperability and hierarchical organization of policies. For each agent X in the community, LGI maintains a control state on behalf of that agent. These control states, which can vary dynamically depending on the law, enable the law to make distinction between various agents. The semantics of the control state are defined by the law and can include things such as the role an agent plays in the community, its identity, its privileges, etc. The law of a community is enforced by trusted mediaries known as controllers. Every message exchange between a pair of agents X and Y is mediated by the controllers Tx and Ty, so that this enforcement is inherently decentralized. The law of a community is defined over certain events occurring at the members of the community, mandating the effect that any such event should have. This mandate is known as the ruling of the law. The events subject to the law, known as regulated events, include among other the sending and arrival of a message, the coming due of an obligation, or the submission of a digital certificate. The operations that can be included in the ruling of a law are known as primitive operations. These include operation on messages such as forward and deliver, operations to modify the control state of the agent where the event occurred, also known as the home agent, or the imposition of an obligation on the home agent. Although the law of a community is global in the sense that it governs the interaction between all the members of the community, it is enforced locally at each member. For a member X of an L community to trust another member to observe the same law, one needs the following assurances: that the messages are exchanged by correctly implemented controllers, the controllers are operating under the same law, and messages are securely transmitted over the network. It is assumed that every community is willing to trust the controllers that have been certified by a given certification authority. To ensure that a message forwarded by a controller Tx operating under law L would be handled by a controller Ty operating under the same law, Tx appends the one-way hash of its law to the message it forwards to Ty. Ty would accept this as a valid L message only if the hash accompanying it is the same as the hash of its own law. It is assumed that the messages transmitted over the network are secure through proper cryptographic authentication and integrity mechanisms. Under LGI, a hierarchy of laws is defined as a tree structure in which the root law, that is L0 in this figure, is specified as an independent LGI law. All the other laws are defined by successive refinements of the root law through a sequence of components. Each component consists of a set of rules that can be invoked by the superior law at appropriate junctures. An evaluation of the ruling of a subordinate law begins with the rules in the superior law. Thus, the superior law controls the effect that a subordinate law can mandate on the agents operating under it. The hierarchical extension of LGI supports interoperability between laws in the following two ways. A law L1 can explicitly allow agents operating under it to interoperate with a specific law L2, or with an arbitrary set of laws that conform to L2, that is L2 itself, L3 and L4 in this figure. The first part of this dissertation is titled Decentralized Peer-to-Peer Secondary Spectrum Marketplaces. Dynamic spectrum access aims to address the spectrum scarcity issue by providing new and effective ways of accessing spectrum to increase the communication capacity and efficiency of spectrum use. Such methods include the exclusive usage rights schemes, Comets model, and opportunistic usage regimes. Much of the work in this area is primarily focused on maximizing bandwidth efficiency, suitably adjusting the power levels of different users, providing effective quality of service to secondary spectrum users, etc., using techniques of optimization and game theory. However, very limited prior work exists dealing with the trading of exclusive access rights to spectrum on secondary markets, even though the US FCC proposed the removal of regulatory barriers for the development of such markets almost a decade ago. Therefore, our goal in this part of the work is to address this issue of trading of exclusive access rights to spectrum specified by frequency band, geographic location, and time period in return for fee payment. We propose a two-step solution to enable easy access to spectrum, to simplify the task of spectrum management, and to improve the overall spectrum efficiency. First, by describing a decentralized secondary spectrum marketplace in which consumers can trade the access rights to a portion of spectrum in return for fee payment under the constraint of obeying the trading rules formulated by the government. And second, by outlining an architecture in which such exclusive access rights to spectrum can be used to regulate the radio device transmission. We have already gone over the requirements of such a secondary spectrum marketplace. One point that needs to be stressed is that such a marketplace must allow consumers to sell, lease, or transfer the access rights to a chunk of spectrum by disaggregating, partitioning, or time sharing the corresponding spectrum in their possession. We have used the terminology of Agarwal et al. Regarding the buying and selling of spectrum to imply the buying and selling of exclusive usage rights to spectrum, and the term spectrum consumers to refer to entities such as cellular network operators, wireless broadband providers, TV companies, end users, etc., that buy and sell, lease, or exchange such spectrum usage rights. Spectrum block refers to a unique assignment of spectrum at a particular frequency for a given location and for a fixed time period. Spectrum blocks are sold without any restrictions or rules about what services can be offered, what blocks can be enabled, or what technologies can be used. That is, spectrum is liberalized with constraint only on the maximum level of interference that can be caused to neighboring spectrum consumers. Let us consider a simplified, motivating example of such a secondary spectrum marketplace. The various entities involved in this case study are as follows. The consumers who either buy and sell or transfer the spectrum blocks among themselves. The banks that serve as the financial infrastructure facilitating the monetary payments, and for simplicity, we assume that all the payments are done by credit cards. An auditor appointed by the government that keeps a record of all the traded spectrum access rights, which can be used later for monitoring spectrum usage and for facilitating the collection of taxes. And a certification authority that provides digital credentials to all the other participants. We assume the presence of a spectrum registry which is used by the consumers to advertise and to search for information regarding spectrum block sales and auctions. It is assumed that a secure and reliable set of geographically distributed controllers known as the controller service is maintained and managed by a government organization such as the FCC that serves as a trusted third party. Such a controller service basically acts as a public utility which can be used by consumers distributed all over the internet. The specific government policy that we consider in this case study deals with the following issues.
Excuse me, you mean separate controller, or that every device will have to have this controller on it?
Not in this case. That is for the second part of the work. In this case, it is assumed that a controller service is maintained and managed by a government organization such as FCC, and it is operated over the internet. Any consumer who wants to participate in this marketplace can authenticate itself by submitting a certificate to one of these controllers, and then it can, I'll just go over the explanation and I can come back to your question if you have one. So So the specific government policy that we consider in this case study deals with the following issues. All the participants are required to authenticate themselves by submitting a certificate signed by the specified CA. Any consumer who has acquired the access rights to a portion of spectrum in primary markets can authenticate such a possession by submitting a certificate signed by the FCC.
In practice, would there be like a controller gateway service that assigns you a particular controller?
There could be one. Any consumer who possesses the access rights to a portion of spectrum may either transfer or sell it either completely or in part by dividing the corresponding spectrum along the frequency, space, time dimensions. Monetary payments in this marketplace are handled securely by banks. Lastly, all the traded spectrum access rights are reported to the auditor. Note that the participants in such a marketplace are likely to exchange a variety of other information messages pertaining to advertisements, negotiations, etc. that is not directly concerned with government regulations, and so the government policy does not deal with these types of messages. So do you still have a question about this?
Well, this communication is wireless or is it ad hoc communication? Or
Internet. This is the controllers are
That's internet.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
In the current implementation, the access rights to a portion of spectrum can be represented by the list of terms, frequency, time, and so on. This model allows spectrum blocks to be formed by dividing the spectrum along the frequency, space, time dimensions. We have extended the previously described secondary spectrum marketplace model to support the hierarchical organization of policies, to take into account the hierarchical nature of the authorities that may be involved in defining its rules, and the volition that may be granted to spectrum consumers to deal with certain issues that is not directly related to government regulations, such as how spectrum goods are to be sold. In this figure, PG denotes the government policy at a higher level, whereas PM1 and PM2 denote the individual local marketplace policies that conform to PG. For example, PM1 may provide fixed price spectrum deals, whereas PM2 may deal with open cry auction deals, and so on. The transaction of spectrum goods between the buyers and sellers in the initial case study involved the bank, which facilitated the credit card transactions. Nonetheless, the hierarchical example incorporates payments via digital cash, thereby making all the interactions in such a marketplace completely decentralized. Digital cash further increases the applicability of the scheme by making it suitable for both micropayment and macropayment deals. Here is a broad outline of the architecture to regulate the radio device transmission based on the exclusive access rights to spectrum, also referred to as tokens in this slide. We assume that each device has a secure clock and a secure GPS that provides the corresponding device with an accurate timing and location information respectively. It is assumed that the tokens stored in the controllers can be transferred to the trusted kernel of the user device. Now, if the transmission requests made by the devices are approved by the kernel, if and only if it satisfies frequency, space, timing, and other constraints mentioned in the token, then it can be ensured that the radio devices transmit in accordance with their spectrum usage rights. Thus, such an architecture can enable proactive enforcement of spectrum usage policies and deter unauthorized transmissions. However, it should be pointed out that this architecture is limited in the sense that it cannot prevent radio devices from transmitting without the tokens if they have been tampered with or if they can be operated without such tokens. The second part of the dissertation introduces a model for the regulation of wireless communication in ad hoc networks, which allows us to control the application level messaging performed by the wireless nodes, and hence it can be viewed as an initial proof of concept for the aforementioned architecture. Agraudis et al. Have described a policy-driven trading framework for market-based spectrum assignment that allows spectrum consumers to trade exclusive access rights to spectrum blocks for electronic payments. However, this framework has many drawbacks. This work only deals with the trading of exclusive access rights, but does not address the crucial question of how these credentials are to be used for policing the spectrum use. Moreover, the authors have used Keynote Trust Management System to implement a prototype of their policy model, and hence this framework cannot support delegation by transfer of privileges. That is, a consumer would not lose its own access rights to spectrum even after transferring it to another consumer. Further, auditing requirements that may be crucial for monitoring spectrum usage cannot be directly supported by trust management frameworks. SpecX.com provides a centralized online real-time marketplace for secondary spectrum trading in the US. This platform allows the entire spectrum licenses or licenses that have been geographically partitioned, frequency disaggregated, or offered on a timeshare basis to be bought, sold, or leased. However, this current state-of-the-art approach involves the FCC indirectly approving the transactions once the buyers and sellers agree to some common terms of the sale. It is possible to use a website such as SpecX as a spectrum registry for our model, whereby sellers can advertise about their spectrum goods and buyers can consequently search and find out information about the deals they are interested in. Then the buyers can interact with the sellers in a P2P fashion by adopting an LGI controller under the specified secondary spectrum marketplace policy. To summarize, in this part we have proposed an innovative secondary spectrum marketplace where consumers can trade the exclusive access rights to a portion of spectrum for fee payment in a decentralized P2P manner without directly involving the governmental agencies. The main benefit of this approach is that it reduces the cost, overhead and delay of secondary spectrum transactions, thereby improving the overall spectrum utilization. Further, we have outlined an architecture to regulate the radio device transmission based on the exclusive access rights to spectrum. The second part of the dissertation provides coordination and control in mobile ubiquitous computing applications. Current mobile ubiquitous technology does not provide adequate support for ad hoc multi-agent systems whose members need to coordinate with each other in order to carry out their functions, irrespective of whether they operate in a competitive or collaborative mode or some mix of the two. Such dynamic coordination is required in a variety of application domains, ranging from military or law enforcement applications, where a diverse team of individuals may be assembled to carry out an open-ended mission, to safety-oriented applications such as vehicular communications, where automobiles may interact with other cars and sensors on the road to share valuable information associated with traffic conditions, to commercial applications such as impromptu marketplaces, where consumers may use their wireless devices to trade content and digital tokens. However, effective and trustworthy coordination requires all the participants to obey to a common coordination protocol. For example, car drivers must coordinate with other motorists in order to survive their passage through an intersection. But this requires all drivers to obey to certain traffic laws, such as the one that requires stopping at a red light. The goal of this part of the work is to provide a secure and reliable mechanism for establishing common coordination protocols over ad hoc multi-agent systems. We illustrate the importance of such a mechanism and some of its desired characteristics via an example of an ad hoc team of police officers whose mission is to manage the traffic in a certain region. In particular, the team is responsible for operating on a set of traffic-related devices such as drawbridges, traffic signals, roadblocks, etc. via collection of sensors and actuators distributed in the domain. Moreover, let us assume that the team is managed by a leader who monitors the progress of the team members and exerts control over what the team members can do. For such a team to operate effectively and safely, it must operate according to a common coordination protocol that regulates the interaction between the team members and the various actuators. Such a protocol should provide effective coordination so that it would never happen, for example, that two members attempt to raise and lower the drawbridge at the same time. Moreover, it should provide the leader with a degree of control so that it can get the information it needs from the team members to manage the entire mission. Further, it should facilitate the proper handling of various exceptions such as the disappearance of the team leader, which may require the employment of a careful leader election procedure. Also, certain missions may desire the devices to work under their own separate protocols so that they can be operated independently of the officers. Further, different teams may operate in a competitive or collaborative mode on the same mission, and hence the proposed solution should be capable of protecting the different groups from each other. So how can we realize such an example? Ensuring that a group of heterogeneous distributed agents operate properly is difficult because the corresponding protocol cannot be practically hardwired into the communication devices of a police cars, as a single police car may be required to operate in multiple missions, either simultaneously or one after another. We need a far more flexible mechanism for establishing a given coordination protocol over ad hoc multi-agent systems. Therefore, our approach to address these challenges leverages the concept of LGI. Corresponding implementation of the proposed mechanism has been carried out on the Orbit testbed. This figure shows the LGI protocol stack for mobile ad hoc network applications. The LGI controller runs on top of the transmission control protocol and the optimum link state routing protocol. TCP is used for reliable message delivery, and we have chosen a proactive routing protocol such as OLSR to minimize the message transmission delay. Each node is assumed to have a trusted implementation of the controller, which may require the use of a trusted platform module. Note that LGI as a mechanism is independent of the network routing protocol. An actor adopts its controller with a particular law to become a member of the corresponding community and then interacts with the other participants via its controller. Experiments were conducted on the Orbit grid with nodes having the following configuration to evaluate the performance of LGI in wireless ad hoc network environment. The controller throughput, representing the number of events it can handle per second, is around 3000. Additionally, a 5-hop topology was set up using Orbit tools to evaluate the overhead added due to LGI. In this case, the overhead due to LGI regulated message transfer as compared to the unregulated message transfer between the two end hosts of the 5-hop topology, that is node 8.1 and node 6.1 in this figure, is around 20%. This overhead is far from prohibitive for most applications. If a given community such as a police team needs to operate in a context that imposes some global constraints on all the wireless communication taking place in it, then the LGI policies may need to be organized into an hierarchy. Therefore, we have extended the LGI implementation on the Orbit testbed to support the hierarchical organization of laws in managed applications. To summarize, in this part we have introduced a mechanism for regulating the interaction between the members of an ad hoc heterogeneous multi-agent system to ensure reliable and secure coordination between them. The full power of the proposed mechanism resides in its ability to handle statefulness, locality, obligations, and exceptions. There are many practical applications of such a system. The third part of the dissertation deals with the issue of resiliency in stateful decentralized access control. Currently, LGI provides the assurance that messages exchanged between two actors is mediated by legitimate controllers via certification. Further, it is assumed that the correctness of the controllers can be ensured by using TPM, but such a trusted hardware solution may not be a viable option for all applications. Although the controllers may be correct at the time of certification, there is no guarantee that later they might not get corrupted due to a malicious attack, or perhaps stop functioning due to a fail-stop failure. Therefore, there is a need to address the failure and Byzantine compromise of controllers to secure the infrastructure of LGI. The goal of this part of the work is to develop techniques for fending against corrupt controllers to make LGI more resilient. Resilience in the context of LGI has been defined to include the following aspects: protecting a community operating under a given law from being adversely affected by a small number of corrupt controllers, discovering corrupt controllers and isolating them, correcting the damage inflicted by such controllers. To protect an LGI community operating under a given law from the Byzantine behavior of rogue agents, we elaborate on two specific approaches in the latter part of this presentation. First, dealing with the design of robust laws, and second, by extending the current LGI model to the twin controller model, in which each actor is required to participate in the community by associating itself with two controllers instead of one. One way of discovering corrupt controllers is via monitoring. Monitoring is a law-independent approach in the sense that it can be made an integral part of all the laws. Monitoring requires the law to mandate the reporting of regulated events that occurs at agents to a distinguished trusted agent in the community, say the monitor. Such reporting enables the monitor to verify if the messaging activities of the corresponding agents is in accordance with the constraints of the law. However, it should be pointed out that monitoring may not be able to precisely pinpoint as to who among a pair of agents involved in a specific message exchange is Byzantine. This is because monitoring is asymmetric in nature. By asymmetric, we mean that if X reports sending a message to Y, but Y does not report receiving the corresponding message within a bounded time limit, then the monitor cannot conclude which of the two agents X or Y is Byzantine, as X may not have actually sent such a message to Y. Conversely, if Y reports receiving a message from X along with a signed copy of such a message, then the monitor can be sure that X must have indeed sent such a message to Y. Moreover, monitoring works under the assumption of no faults. Isolating corrupt controllers.
What do you mean that it works on the assumption of what?
That is, no message failures and failure of agents.
Sorry?
No message failures and failures of agents.
You mean even if one message failed, the entire monitoring is useless?
Well, it's not that entire monitoring is useless, but the way it is proposed, it would not hold, the conditions would not hold. If even a message fails or even one agent fails, then the way the monitoring has been proposed will not hold. So I've cited the reference, it's your work.
Yeah, but now monitoring is a by itself resilient thing. You may not discover everything, but you still discover something.
Yes.
So it is not entirely
Yes.
so sensitive. Okay, go on.
Isolating corrupt controllers and preventing them from causing further damage to the uncompromised agents of the community needs some consideration to be given to how a controller may be attacked. If a controller is compromised and is used to send arbitrary L messages without its private key being revealed, then it is possible to stop such an attack from further damaging the community by manually switching off the machine on which the controller operates. On the other hand, if the controller's certificate and private key are compromised, then the attacker can masquerade as the corresponding L agent and send L messages to the other members of the community. In such a scenario, blacklisting the compromised key may be the only option to prevent further damage. Correcting the damage inflicted by corrupt controllers is a complicated issue that may be completely dependent on the application and law at hand, and so its discussion is outside the scope of this work. We propose two complementary principles that describe the fundamental characteristics of a resilient versus a non-resilient law in terms of whether the properties of the law can or cannot be violated by a Byzantine agent. The dual checking principle states that any constraint of a law that can be satisfied by redundantly checking the appropriate conditions for sending at the sender's controller and receiving the corresponding messages at the receiver's controller cannot be violated as long as both the controllers are not corrupt. This principle can be illustrated by considering the example of a simplified ping-pong policy. This policy deals with the exchange of two types of messages: ping messages, which may represent a question or a request, and pong messages, which are used as a reply to a previously received ping. A ping message sent by X to Y is said to be unresolved if X does not receive a corresponding pong reply to it. The protocol governing the interaction of these messages between agents specifies the following two constraints. X can ping Y only if it does not have an unresolved ping already sent to Y. For every ping that X receives from Y, it can respond with a single pong message, and this is the only circumstance under which pong messages can be sent. The corresponding law regulates the interaction between an agent X and the other agents in the community by storing the following two terms in its control state. The term ping to Y implies that X has sent a ping message to Y but has not received a corresponding pong reply to it. The term ping from Y implies that X has received a ping message from Y but has not responded to it with a pong message. When X sends a ping M message to Y, its controller CX verifies that X does not have an unresolved ping sent to Y by checking for the absence of the ping2 term for Y in the control state. Since in this case such a term does not exist, it is added to the control state and the message is forwarded to the corresponding destination. The controller CY, on receiving a ping message, adds a corresponding ping from term for the sender in its control state and delivers the message to its actor without performing any checks. Next, if X tries to send a ping M prime message to Y, then CX would drop such a message because X already has an unresolved ping sent to Y, thus observing the first constraint of the ping pong policy. Now if Y tries to send a pong M message to X, then its controller CY verifies that Y has an unresolved ping received from X by checking for the presence of the ping from term for X in the control state. Since such a term exists, it is removed from the control state and the message is forwarded to the corresponding destination. CX, on receiving a pong message, simply removes the ping2 term for the sender from its control state if it exists and delivers the message to its actor without performing any checks. Next, if Y tries to send a pong M prime message to X, then its controller CY would drop such a message because Y does not have an unresolved ping received from X, thus observing the second constraint of the ping pong policy. However, this law is brittle because if an agent X is using a corrupt controller, then it would be able to send multiple ping messages to Y without receiving the corresponding pong messages from it, and Y would accept all such ping messages from X. Similarly, a Byzantine agent would be able to send multiple pong messages to Y without receiving the corresponding ping messages from it, and Y would accept all such pong messages. Overall, a Byzantine agent can compromise both the constraints of the ping pong law. Nonetheless, this law can be made resilient such that none of the properties of the ping pong law would get violated as long as both the controllers involved in sending and receiving a message are not corrupt by applying principle 1. In the modified law, an agent could accept a ping message only if it does not have a corresponding ping from term for the sender in its control state. This implies that if a Byzantine agent X tries to send multiple ping messages to Y, then CY would drop all the consequent pings received from X after the initial ping message because it would already have a ping from term for X in its control state. Similarly, no agent Y would receive pong messages from X without having sent the corresponding ping messages to it. The local verification principle states that any constraint of a law that requires the verification of certain conditions to be carried out locally and the corresponding member's controller is inherently open to violation, since there is no way to ensure that the specified constraint would be obeyed once the controller is compromised. Let us clarify the idea behind this principle by considering the example of dynamic layering policy. Under the dynamic layering architecture, system components are organized into groups called layers, labeled with successive integers starting with 0, and are subject to the following message passing constraint. Any system component can send any message to another component, but it must attach its current level to the message. When a message arrives, it would be accepted only if the level attached to it is identical to or one more than the current level of the receiver, otherwise it is blocked.
It only goes up.
It's not,
Messages never come down, they only go up.
the layers are assigned from
Right.
bottom to up.
So it's different than networking where I can talk to the layer above me or the layer below me.
Yeah, but you can think of it more in terms of the multi-level security policy which the military follows. The corresponding law requires the layer of each component to be stored as a level term in its control state. In this figure, X and Y are assigned to layers 4 and 3 respectively. When X sends a message M to Y, its controller CX appends the layer of X to such a message and forwards it to CY. CY, on receiving a message, verifies if the layer attached to it is the same as or one more than the layer of its member. Since in this case it is one more than the layer of the member, it delivers the message to Y. The dynamic layering law satisfies the message passing constraint by depending on the controllers to locally verify the layer of their members. Therefore,
Why do you call it dynamic?
because I have skipped out a part of this protocol which is
Okay.
okay. So this law, so the dynamic layering law satisfies the message passing constraint by depending on the controllers to locally verify the layer of their members. Therefore, according to principle 2, this constraint can be violated once a controller is compromised. At the sending end, a rogue agent can attach an arbitrary layer to the message it forwards to another component. Similarly, at the receiving end, a visiting agent, or rather a visiting controller, can always deliver the message it receives to its member, irrespective of the layer at which its member resides. We now propose certain techniques for designing robust laws. A law can be made more robust if it is designed such that only the required amount of information necessary to satisfy the constraints of the corresponding policy is sent in the messages, so that each message has a specific distinct purpose. If a participant in a community is given certain privileges based on submitting a certificate to its controller, then the law should mandate that such a certificate be also verified by a trusted agent in the community who would play the role of the directory for the community. This can prevent malicious agents from misusing such privileges. The fail-stop failure of an agent can be handled by obligating such an agent to report heartbeat messages to a trusted agent in the community. A law can be designed to handle various communication-related faults via the exception facility of LGI. If the controller associated with a member experiences a fail-stop failure, then it should be possible to recover the control state of the corresponding member to his previous working content. Such saving of control state can be achieved by obligating the agents to report their control state terms to a distinguished agent. Another approach is that the law can mandate all the agents adopting it to create a virtual agent, which is a lone controller that can be used to deposit the control state terms in a tightly regulated manner.
So the first bullet is tricky. what does it mean to define the necessary amount? And that's
So-
almost contrary to the design criteria that Abadi and Needham suggest, which is that you should have redundant information so you avoid protocol exploitation.
Okay, so the idea over here is that if, for example, you design a message such that it satisfies two constraints at the same time, you may end up providing some extra information to the agents which they must filter it out. So in that case, if a controller is compromised, it can misuse that extra information. So instead of doing that, you should design each message so that it satisfies the specific distinct constraint, so that you do not reveal any extra information to any agent which is not required according to the protocol.
So I was just going to add that the answer also could be that often we forget, or often we don't know what necessary is when we are defining something, and we didn't include a field that turned out later to be necessary. Right? So like often in protocols, you forget to say message number 4 came from Alice. You left out Alice's name in there because you just assumed you were in a protocol, you were going back and forth. And then that led to an exploitation, that led to Charles replaying something. So necessary is
So it is different from the example you are describing.
right, but
And there are
it is, what I'm trying to say though is that it still is involved in an amount of figuring out what is necessary.
right, and I have described also a few examples of that in the dissertation. And by the way, this is a short version of the technique. There's a more elaborate version in the dissertation, which would make it more clear, I suppose. We now go over the second approach to provide.
Before that, you mentioned the layering architecture.
Yes,
How do you handle that?
we
How
cannot
do you
handle.
handle?
That's what I said. We cannot handle. The constraint can be violated once the controller is compromised.
And you cannot handle it at all. How about monitoring and so forth?
You can include monitoring, but monitoring has its own limitation. I already pointed that out.
Well, every security problem has its own limitation, and therefore one uses several of them which have different kind of limitations. So to protect itself.
Yes. So yes.
So
So
to say
monitoring
it
can
is not
be.
going to handle, it may not be handleable in one technique, but maybe handleable in another, or combination.
Yes, it can be partially handled by monitoring.
Everything could be only partially.
Well, the technique one for the ping pong policy is completely resilient. It can be completely handled in a decentralized fashion. We now go over the second approach to provide protection by extending the current LGI model to the twin controller model, in which each actor is required to operate in the community by associating itself with two controllers to prevent one and generally more Byzantine agents from compromising the properties of the community. In particular, we illustrate this idea by applying it to handle delegation by transfer in a resilient manner, so that a single Byzantine agent is unable to forge and or misuse a privilege. Consider a motivating example of a group of soldiers who coordinate with each other to complete a common task and have a distinguished leader among themselves, such that the leader has the power to issue commands to the various soldiers. The soldiers are required to carry out appropriate actions in response to the leader's command. Moreover, the leader may transfer his leadership privilege to any soldier for a variety of reasons. This case study also consists of a secretary which acts as the trusted directory for the community and a certification authority that provides digital credentials to all the participants. It is assumed that the secretary is trusted and there are no faults in terms of message failures or failure of agents. It is also assumed that there is a predefined list of certified controllers available such that each controller can be associated with only one participant at a time. The specific delegation by transfer policy that we consider over here is as follows. All the soldiers and the secretary are required to authenticate themselves by presenting a certificate signed by the specified CA. The soldiers are required to adopt 2 controllers and to register with the secretary at the time of joining the community. The secretary is responsible for maintaining and distributing the information regarding the twins of a soldier to all the other agents. A soldier playing the role of the leader can transfer his leadership privilege by sending the corresponding transfer message through both his twins. The recipient member's controller would accept such a transfer only if they receive a copy of the same from the twin of the corresponding sender. A leader can similarly issue commands to the other soldiers. In this figure, X adopts the controllers C1 and C2 by submitting a certificate signed by the CA, authenticating it to be the leader, and then registers with the secretary to operate in the community. Similarly, Y adopts the controllers C3 and C4 to operate in the community. Then X queries information regarding the twins of Y from the secretary and stores the corresponding information as the term twins Y, Y at C3, Y at C4 in his control state. Similarly, Y queries the information regarding the twins of X and stores it in its control state. Let us now go over the messages which are exchanged to achieve delegation of leadership role by transfer. X can transfer his leadership privilege to Y by first sending a transfer message through C1, or it may alternatively use C2 for this purpose. C1, on receiving a transfer message, verifies that X is the current leader and suitably updates the control state by removing the leader term before forwarding the corresponding transfer message to the twins of Y, that is Y at C3 and Y at C4. The twins of Y, on receiving a transfer message, add a corresponding pending term for the transfer with X and X at C1 as its argument. Next, X sends the transfer message to Y through C2. C2 once again verifies that X is the current leader and then suitably updates the control state before forwarding the transfer message to the twins of Y. The twins of Y, on receiving a second transfer message for X from X at C2, which they know is the twin of the agent X at C1 who has sent such a transfer message earlier, remove the corresponding pending term for the transfer, add the leadership role to the control state, and inform Y that it is the new leader. A leader can similarly issue commands to any other soldier. Note that when the leader issues a command, it is not necessary to involve both the recipient members' controllers in such a message exchange, as the recipient only needs to verify that the sender of such a message is the current leader, which it does by waiting for a copy of the same from the twin of the corresponding sender. Now, the above example is susceptible to 2 kinds of attacks. The first one is the misuse of leadership privilege to issue commands, which can happen either by hijacking the current leader's controllers or by forging such commands after corrupting the controllers belonging to any member except the leader. The second type of attack is the stealing of leadership privilege, whereby an adversary, after corrupting the current leader's controllers, can initiate a transfer of the leadership privilege through these controllers without the current leader's consent. In the implementation of this case study via the TC model, there cannot be any forgery and or misuse of privileges as long as both the controllers representing a member are not corrupt. Moreover, no adversary can steal the leadership privilege without compromising both the controllers of the current leader. In short, if there are M members, then the implementation of this case study via TC model is resilient up to M Byzantine controllers, as long as the corresponding pair of twins is not corrupt. To summarize, in this part we have introduced the notion of resiliency to develop techniques for fending against corrupt controllers to make LGI more trustworthy. After that, we discussed the framework to provide resilience in the context of LGI. Next, we focused on the protection aspect of resiliency by defining the fundamental characteristics of a resilient versus a non-resilient law and enumerated on techniques to design robust laws. Further, we extended the original LGI model to the twin controller model to avoid one and generally more Byzantine agents from compromising the properties of the system. To conclude, this dissertation has focused on the problem of regulating the interaction between members of an open, mobile, heterogeneous, wireless distributed system. We initially addressed the issue of underutilization of spectrum by proposing a two-step solution to this problem. First, by describing a decentralized secondary spectrum marketplace, and second, by outlining an architecture to regulate the radio device transmission. Next, we presented a mechanism based on the concept of LGI to provide effective and trustworthy coordination in mobile ubiquitous applications. Since this implementation allows us to control the application level messaging performed by the wireless nodes, it can be viewed as an initial proof of concept for the preceding architecture. Finally, we deliberated on the problem of resiliency in stateful decentralized access control to mitigate the effect of corrupt controllers under LGI, to make LGI more robust. There are several avenues that can be explored as future work to the ideas presented in this dissertation. For instance, the secondary spectrum marketplace model can be extended to enable the safe evolution of policies that govern such a marketplace while such a trading system continues to operate. Also, implementing the LGI controller using a TPM can significantly add to the robustness of the LGI mechanism. Further, one may try to analyze the amount of harm that can be caused by rogue agents and the possible means for correcting such damages to come up with some general tools to address this issue. These are the references, publications, and that's it. Thank you.